What was it like to be in New York City or D.C. on 9/11? Let's welcome in SU professor Sean O'Keefe, who in September of 2001 was deputy director of the Office of Management and Budget in the George W. Bush administration, also member of the National Council Security Team for the White House. Sean, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Pleasure to be with you.
What did intelligence, the White House, know about Al-Qaeda before 9/11?
Well, a fair amount. The National Security Council team, the NSC team, knew a fair amount of the activities and the development growth, as well as the seriousness of the Al-Qaeda team, and knew exactly what was beginning to emerge. But nobody, I think the 9/11 Commission documented this, nobody anticipated they'd be capable of doing what they did on September 11th, 20 years ago.
So what were you doing on September 11th, 2001, that morning when this all unfolded to the surprise of so many?
That morning I had a routine meeting at about 8 o'clock or so with the vice president in the West Wing of the White House and going through some really critically important budget data that for the life of me, I can't recall what it was. And within 5 minutes after the events went down that day, and he and I were there working through this routine set of issues when suddenly the hotline rang and advised to take a look at the television set. And what we saw was the first of the two Twin Towers having been struck and smoldering. We thought, like the rest of everybody else observing this, that this was a civil aviation accident in New York City. Because if you recall back at that time, all the airlines flew right over Manhattan, no problem whatsoever, over Washington, D.C., everybody.
But what's that moment like, though, Sean, when you realize, I mean, you're an aviation expert, right? I mean, you realize this is not an accident. I mean, what's that feeling like for you and the vice president and others there?
When the second strike occurred, it was clear this was not an accident. This was something that clearly was perpetrated. And the National Security Team and the security personnel in the White House immediately mobilized and scooped up the vice president to move him to an undisclosed location that is sparsely referred to nowadays in terms of where he went to actually conduct the activities. So it was a very prompt response immediately after the second strike occurred to realize you didn't need to have a briefing on it. You knew this was something that was much more than what a civil aviation accident would have entailed.
Do you personally go into action mode because now you've got to react, or do you have any moment soon thereafterwards or later in the day where you go, oh my gosh, we were just attacked on American soil by terrorists?
It was a jarring event. There was no question. There was an awful lot of confusion, certainly around the White House complex and frankly around Washington, D.C., because the consequence of the strike on the Pentagon was moved. It was very evident over to the D.C. area, right across the river from the Washington, D.C. area. So it had a really, really profound effect on everybody's psyche, and the very idea that something like this could happen in Washington, here on our national soil in the United States, anywhere, was an inconceivable proposition.
Did you know anybody really close to you that was killed in the attacks?
Yes. Matter of fact, right before joining the White House staff in 2001, I was here at Syracuse University teaching on the faculty in the Maxwell School. And one of my graduate assistants, who had been a member of the research team that I had while a faculty member here, about a year beforehand, got an offer to take his dream job that he wanted, to be in the Naval Intelligence Community. He was in that part of the Pentagon that was struck by the commercial flight that the terrorist had hijacked. And on that flight was a neighbor of mine who lived no more than a couple of blocks away, and for which we had gotten to know very well. And he was on his way out to California and perished as well. So both of them in the same incident that I knew very well were lost on that day.
Must be crushing. What's it like to remember them, remember that day? Now 20 years later, what's it like? Something you live frequently just on September 11th? What's it like?
Well, fairly often. I mean, I think one of the greatest tributes to Brady Howell, my graduate assistant who perished that day after his, assuming the professional task at the Naval Intelligence Community. Every year at commencement, there is a Brady Howell speaker, and every year there is always someone who is appointed to that task or given the privilege, the honor of that task, to express on behalf of all of the generations that have followed, for those who aspired to public service, to understand this is what he gave his life for, what he was dedicated to, and it reminds everyone that this is not without risk. It's a very, very important, poignant commentary that we really honor every year at the commencement exercise for the Masters in Public Administration students at Maxwell.
Never forget, Sean O'Keefe, SU professor now, was in the White House on September 11th, 2001. Thanks for sharing. I'd love to continue this conversation. We've run out of time for now, but really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.